Welcome to the video panel on global workspace theory and the LIDA model. Today our panelists are Dr. Stan Franklin, who is a professor of computer science at the Memphis University, and Dr. Bernard Barth, who recently accepted the position of affiliated research fellow at the Krasnov Institute for Advanced Study at George Mason University. And the topic of discussion is the paper by Stan Franklin, Steve Strain, and others entitled Global Workspace Theory, its LIDA model, and the underlying neuroscience. So we start with the easy question. In what sense can we say that LIDA implements the global workspace theory? Is it computationally, conceptually, or otherwise? And the question is addressed to Stan. Stan, please go on.
Well, the LIDA model addresses the sort of the beginnings of global workspace theory, namely how it works. According to the LIDA model, human cognition, of which consciousness is put out by global workspace theory as a piece, operates on cognitive cycles, and these cycles operate at 5 to 10 per second. Every agent, whether it's a human or an animal or an artificial one, has got to sample its environment and understand what it gets and choose an action and perform that action. It also has to learn in this process. And global workspace theory, at least the beginnings of global workspace theory, plays a critical role in that. Can you put that diagram number 1 up?
Okay, just give me 1 second.
That would be a help.
Yeah, I put it. It is here. Please continue.
Okay. So people will be able to see it?
Yeah, people can see it.
I can't see it.
You cannot, but they see you and they see the diagram.
Ah, all right. Then I need to get it in front of me, but I can do that very quickly. All right. There I am. If you notice, this looks like what happens is the sensory input comes in on the left, and in the beginning, you have perception and understanding takes place. Maybe they're essentially the same. But then the issue is that too many things have come in to be dealt with all at once in a very short period of time, a small fraction of a second. And so then the most salient piece of things that has to be dealt with immediately gets selected out by the global workspace, and so that's in the very center of it. And from there, it's broadcast out to all of the cognitive processes, and it's used in this sense for essentially 2 purposes. The one purpose is to help select the next action with which to respond to the situation. And the second is to learn in so many ways, perceptually, spatially, sonically, attentionally, procedurally, all these learnings 5 to 10 times a second.
Stan, I'm sorry, I'm losing your sound, and maybe we can also give word to Bernard if Bernard wants to say something about this picture.
All righty.
No, I don't have anything in particular to say. The important part about it, of course, is that is the bottleneck, and that is something which I think all of us have been trying to understand actually for a very long time. And Stan gives an account of the bottleneck in terms of the GW LIDA model that he has had running actually for a number of years.
Yeah, essentially what consciousness does is first to filter out everything but the most salient that we have to pay attention to, and then to respond to make it possible to respond in an appropriate way and to learn at the same time. And so those are the functions of consciousness at the lowest level. Now then you get up to higher levels of functional consciousness, deliberation and planning, such things. They happen in multiple cognitive cycles rather than one.
Okay, how about this question previously suggested by Bernard, that in LIDA we have only action selection relying on the global workspace theory, but why do not use it for sensory perception, language understanding, problem solving, and everything else?
Well, many of these, all of these higher cognitive processes are built up from these cognitive cycles. They're all done over multiple cognitive cycles, not all at once. And so each of the cognitive cycles, the actions selected there are consciously mediated. They use consciousness, but I don't consciously decide or select what to do. I'm not aware of selecting the words that are coming out of my mouth right now. On the other hand, when I begin to deliberate, to plan, or to schedule, or to imagine these things, then the consciousness itself is part of I'm conscious of the selection process. So in these multi-cyclic deliberative things, the consciousness plays two roles. It not only plays the role for mediating the action selection, but it also does all this decision making.
Okay, this makes sense. It would make perfect sense if we understood what is consciousness. I understand that in your model, in your implementation, it is a very specific term, and you basically refer to the functionalist aspect of consciousness. People also talk about phenomenological aspect, and I am wondering how these two are related to each other in your implementation of the global workspace theory.
You want to speak to that one, Bernie? I think both of us will be reluctant to, but I'm willing. But you go ahead if you want to say something.
Well, Stan has a slightly different view of these things, in some ways more optimistic and in some ways more pessimistic than mine. I'm not going to pretend to be Stan and say his viewpoint exactly. I think that that consciousness gets involved with numbers of processes in the brain, and the popular conception, which includes the philosophical conception for many centuries, has been that it is heavily involved with perception, sensory perception, and with rationality. Those are incomplete. That's a somewhat old-fashioned point of view, but it's not entirely wrong. So action selection, I think, fits pretty much in that overall framework, because it is traditionally viewed as a rational process, or at least as an adaptive process. And I think that as we've begun to dug more and more into cognitive functions like language and incubation, problem solving over time, emotional integration, interpersonal processes, and so on, you have to deal much more with long-term processes, including lifelong processes that last for decades, and which require you to deal with more than a single cognitive cycle. So Stan is being very self-disciplined about dealing with a single cognitive cycle, because in dealing with such a complex system, you need to constrain it in some way, so don't just go all over the place. and this is a useful constraint for Stan's work with this very large a computational system that keeps growing in principled ways. It's not growing in arbitrary ways, and so that's a very good guiding principle for the project. I'm somewhat more all over the place because I've been looking very much into the biology and brain bases, as well as the psychology of consciousness. So we have somewhat different viewpoints toward all this. And my original training in cognitive psychology was very much in what Stan would call a multi-cycle aspect of the system. In any case, we have somewhat different viewpoints, which is productive in the sense that we interact with each other very nicely, and we keep growing in useful directions.
I agree with all of that, but Alexei, I think, did I misunderstand, or did you ask us about the phenomenal piece of consciousness?
Yes, there was a question about the phenomenal aspect of
that
consciousness.
Wasn't the one you just asked.
Well, so then let me ask this again. Is there any, or do you believe that there is any implementation of the phenomenal aspect of consciousness in LIDA?
Well, I actually have a paper about that for IDA, or the predecessor of LIDA, in which I said I didn't think so. That, you see, all we can do about phenomenology, how do I know that you or Bernie are conscious?
Exactly.
I mean, I can't know that. I can only attribute it. And I do attribute it to both of you. You're so much like me, as are other humans. But I even attribute it to my cats. And who knows how far down the line it goes. Bernie has a very nice paper on arguing persuasively that you should attribute it to all mammals. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't go a lot.
So why do you believe... sorry.
And maybe even to artificial systems. I think what's going to happen is that once they get smart enough to remind us of ourselves, then we will attribute consciousness to them. If Mr. Data, Commander Data from Star Trek The Next Generation walked into the room, I would be happy to attribute consciousness to him, knowing that he's a robot.
Thank you very much, and it was a real pleasure to interact with you. I will stop the session now. Thank you for your time.